Hello, and welcome to today's program, co-hosted by the Phoebe A. Hearst Museum of Anthropology and the Center for Japanese Studies at UC Berkeley. My name is Katie Fleming, and I'm the Education Coordinator at the Hearst Museum, and I'm thrilled to have you all here and to welcome so many people from around the world. I'd like to open our program with a land acknowledgement, followed by some guidance on how best to view today's program on Zoom, and then we'll get into the program itself. We take a moment to recognize that Berkeley sits on the territory of Huchun, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people, the successors of the historic and sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to the Muwekma Ohlone tribe and other familial descendants of the Verona Band. We recognize that every member of the Berkeley community has benefited from and continues to benefit from the use and occupation of this land since the institution's founding in 1868. Here at the Hearst Museum, we're working to recognize and grapple with our own specific origins and the role within the university. Even before we existed as a museum, our collections began with projects that participated in and were made possible by campaigns of genocide waged against Native Californian people, ancestors whose descendants are still here alive with us today. As a museum, we want to acknowledge the pain our institution has caused and work to offer a meaningful apology. We aim to create new kinds of collaborative relationships in the present and future, which will affirm Indigenous sovereignty and hold ourselves accountable to the needs of American Indian and Indigenous people. We want to offer an apology by transforming the museum into a site for justice, inclusion, anti-racist action, and Indigenous knowledge production. I'd like now to share with you all some kind of best practices for viewing today's program. Firstly, I just wanted to let everyone know that today's program is being recorded. It's going to be available for viewing at a later date on the Hearst Museum's YouTube channel, which we're going to drop the link to in the chat. Because it's being recorded and for the privacy of you, we ask that you keep your video and microphone off for the duration of this program, as well as to keep the focus on our speakers. We recommend that you view this program in speaker view, which you can select by going to the upper right-hand corner of your screen and clicking view and then selecting speaker view. To submit a question for tonight's program, I'm going to ask that you submit those questions directly to me. And the way you can do that is by going down to the chat button at the bottom of your screen or elsewhere on your device if you're not viewing on a computer, clicking the chat button and then selecting my name, Katie Fleming, from the drop-down menu and submitting your questions that way. We'll be posing questions to the speakers at the end of today's program, and we'll try to get to as many people's questions as possible. And lastly, I just want to thank you again all for being here. And I'm just going to stop my screen share. And it's really my pleasure tonight to introduce Junko Habu, Professor of Anthropology at UC Berkeley. Professor Habu teaches East Asian archaeology with a focus on prehistoric Japanese archaeology. In addition, she's the chair of the Center for Japanese Studies, the co-host of tonight's event, and a faculty curator of East Asian collections at the Phoebe A. Hearst Museum of Anthropology. So thank you so much for being here, Junko, and I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce the speaker for today's program.
Thank you, Katie. It is a great pleasure to introduce Kazuyo Nishihara, a PhD student of Kyoto University and a visiting student of the Center for Japanese Studies at UC Berkeley. Kazuyo Kaz is interested in continuity and change in landscape practice from the past to the present and to the future. She has conducted archaeological research in Japan and China, and since 2011, she has participated in excavations and laboratory analysis of archaeological materials from the Jomon period of the Japanese archipelago and the Neolithic period of China. She's particularly interested in long-term sustainability of human-environmental interactions with a focus on plant use and forest management. And when you think of Japan, people may have the idea that Japan, with high tech and everything, but actually if you look at the map of Japan, 2/3 of the country is covered with forest, and you can really see traditional ecological knowledge being maintained by people living in different parts of Japan. So focusing on basketry from archaeological and ethnographic viewpoints, Kaz incorporates ethnographic records folklores and material collections and traditional ecological knowledge of rural Japan into her archaeological interpretations. She's currently working her dissertation project on subsistence and land management in past and present Japan. Outreach activities are also her passion, and she has actively participated in workshops and lectures to collaborate with local communities and individuals. So please welcome Kaz Nishihara.
Thank you so much for the warm introduction, Junko and Katie, for organizing this event. So let me share the screen here. Wait. So here you go. So can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Oh yeah, and slideshow starting. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about the basketry and plant use in prehistoric Japan. And I'm talking to you from the Berkeley in California. As many of you are, my life is widely affected by COVID-19, but I hope this talk about basketry in Japan is mutually enjoyable for all of us. So, 皆さんこんにちは、今日はバークレーの自宅から、お話ししています。約1年半の予定の留学生活、すでに1年ほどがCOVID のおかげで、シェルターインプレイスオーダーという状況で過ぎているんですけれども、そんな中でも楽しんでいただけるように今日はお話ししたいと思います。So today I'm going to talk about basketry in Japan and introduce the archaeobotanical achievement in Japanese archaeology during the last couple of decades. In addition, I wanted to bring together the ethnographic account by historical and contemporary basket makers of Japan. Basketry is not only about the techniques, it is about preparation. It is about knowing your local environment and interacting with it. So let's start the big question, why studying basket is important. Basketry has been made across the world, and it has unique connection with each local community and history. It is not only daily tools, it's many times represents the identity of communities that carries traditional ecological knowledge that also interwoven in the local biosphere and human activity. Thus, that brings us awareness of long-term sustainability, helps us to revitalize intimate relationship between human and environment. I have been studying basketry, focusing on prehistoric Japan, the Jomon period. As my research proceeding, I became aware that it is not only studying basket itself. It is about the world that basket came from. Japan has a long tradition of basketry. Since its 95% of the land is covered by the forest, despite the fact that big industrial change occurred in after World War II, there's still basket makers and their knowledge, especially in the mountainous area. Recently, basket become more popular as a fashion items, and basket makers re-evaluate the value of techniques and the knowledge they have. Still, there's so much possibility that material cultural studies and archaeology can contribute to these local communities. By examining local long-term history about how landscape was formed in the present status in conjunction with human activities. I hope this talk will give a sense what Japanese basket looks like and how we can connect through the lens of basket and how we can connect through the basket across the Pacific Ocean. So I'd like to start with my personal experience with the local small environment. I was born in Western Japan and grew up in an urban area. So I wasn't very familiar with going to the mountains, hiking, and gathering plants until I moved into the outskirts of the Kyoto city. By then, I started learning about basketry and wrote my master's thesis on prehistoric Japanese basket. Then gradually I realized that basketry is not only about basket and its weaving techniques. Rather, basket making begins with how we condition the land and how we condition our local circumstances. Professional basket makers and artists, they say the same things to me when I talk to them. You need to know where you can find the plants for basket. When you know it, memorize where you are, memorize where they are, and manage the place carefully. The picture shows where I and other amateur basket weavers went to gather the vines for basket making. That was, for me, is the first experience that I go to gather raw materials in a local environment. The place was very small in the middle of town, and I totally unaware what I can find there before someone told me. So that's a great experience. The awareness bring us to the local environmental, local environment, and we can connect with the knowledge to the environment. In Japan, conditioning ground for basket weaving is not intensive compared to other activities, but it included in daily routine and lives. So today's topic is going to be divided in two parts. First, I will discuss about the basket through the lens of traditional ecological knowledge that was practiced in the Japanese archipelago. We are able to access the traditional ecological knowledge through the ethnobotanical accounts of basket makers in Japan, as well as through archaeological data that accumulated for the last couple of decades. Second, I will briefly introduce archaeological studies and archaeobotanical studies on basketry of prehistoric Japan, which is about 12,000 to 2,500 years before present. And what this basket tells us, the interaction, the people at that time and with their environment. From daily necessities collections, there were at least 16 of them in Japan. They were mainly collected in the 1960s and 1970s. We can tell many areas in Japan, especially 1960s, bamboo basket has a dominant position. It is mainly because that bamboo baskets are traditional since the at least medieval times, and especially in Western Japan. If you go to rural area in Western Japan and places like the Kanto region, you may see the bamboo forest still remain everywhere nearby houses and around the villages. On the other hand, in the mountainous areas, making basket is not made by bamboos have remained. These differences are mainly led by the climate and vegetation of each area. On this map, I only marked some places that I will mention in this talk today. One of them is Hida City in central Japan, located in the very center of the archipelago. So this is the scenery of Hida City. That is very mountainous area and known for very snowy climate, especially in winter. The Hida Miyagawa Archaeology and Folklore Museum has about 30,000 collection of daily necessities. that shows the life of mountainous high snowfall area. Part of this collection was designated to the important tangible for cultural property, 重要有形民族文化財 in Japan. And this collection also has a carry baskets made of some cypress families among bamboo basket. So the right side, two of that is a carry basket. And that has a unique shape of like very square and narrow from the side view. It's very suitable for if you're carrying in a dense vegetation in mountainous side, and it's very steep area. The other two baskets are the cap for knives, which is also carried in a mountain area. So I'm going to talk about the other ethnographical accounts, but since I haven't experienced the specific areas, so forgive me without like photos and just talking about the ethnographical account. But not only Central Japan and Northern Japan, in Western Japan, for example, Yogo, Ohara, Shiga, also has a long tradition of basket making that's made of painted maple. The basket maker, Tadano Tsutomu, mentioned how they chose raw materials for different purposes. In Ohara village, the Yogo area is very snowy and Madake bamboo aren't growing well there. So the basket makers in Ohara had long used mainly painted maple. And also he mentioned water walk was used for baskets that mainly used in water or water streams. He was the last person who learned by traditional way of weaving Ohara basket. According to him, people used to condition the local environment, set the bar for each year, how much they can use, and come back to the same place for about 15 years later. Nowadays, few people are doing this, but locals and volunteers started the revitalization program in 2009. Other examples are akebi vine, sprints of a walnut tree, and Japanese cherry tree. In general, basket makers in snowy areas tend to gather these raw materials right before snow season and dry them in the house and make them into baskets in winter season. Shinichi Nakagawahara, an akebi vine basket maker in Yokote, Akita Prefecture, is working with his wife and making baskets for decades. He's now the only person who make a living by weaving baskets in Akita Prefecture. But there's so many people out there weaving baskets. It's not for living, but they can still do that. And he mentioned, he mentioned akebia flower blooms in spring. So he memorized where they find it. And later on, especially in summer, come back to gather the materials. So let's move on to the Jomon basket. From the archaeological site, except for Kanto area, we can see various kinds of raw materials were used in Jomon period. Archaeological evidence, imprints of the bottom of pottery show that it has been started at least 12,000 years ago in Japan. In many societies, including Jomon people in Japan, basket has to be one of the most important tools. Finding basket from the archaeological site is not a new thing, but it was really hard to preserve them. Thanks to the development of conservation innovation since the 1980s, the baskets that are found in archaeological sites become well preserved these days. So far, in the Japanese archipelago, more than 80 sites, around 1,000 baskets and pieces of basketry have been found. Many of them are dated to the Jomon period, the Neolithic era in Japan, and show a wide range of basket techniques and materials. This is the brief overview of chronology of Jomon period. From around 12,000 years ago, the evidence of human activities in Japanese archipelago appeared, such as pottery and campsites and so on. From approximately 7,000 years ago, we can see the appearance, the dense, intensive human activities on the land. There are 6 major sub-periods in the Jomon period: incipient, initial, early, middle, late, and final period. So I will mention the Higashimyo site in next slide, and that is dated to from 6,500 to 5,000 years ago. In early period, that has the largest volume of basket found from the German site so far. So let's take a closer look at some Jomon basket found from this archipelago. So this photo shows the scenery of Sanai Maruyama of current situation. That is really known for the initial the early and middle Jomon period. And that was really also known for big architectures and also the beautiful Jomon basket. So this was made from the hiba bark that is still growing in this area. So the person who identified this the materials also think like there's a specific area material choosing when it comes to basketry making. So this picture shows an example of basket found in Higashimyo site, Saga Prefecture, the southern part of Japan. This site was found in 1997 and during the construction of the retarding basin in Saga Plain. This excavation team ended up finding more than 700 baskets, animal bones, and 5 big shell middens, storage pits, and hundreds containers of organic materials and pottery. The site was designated National Historic Sites in 2015. So this is the most iconic basket types from from Higashimyo site. That has a narrow mouth, and it was consisted of several different materials only in one basket. And there was some attempt to replicate the basket, and they found it that will be more than 50 centimeters long. That is a big basket, and some of them were found in a some of them are found in a storage pit and with the chestnut in them. So they are considered as a storage basket with soaking nuts to repellent insects. At Higashimyo site, Jomon people used a wide variety of techniques and different raw materials, even in one basket. The picture shows us the Ichigo shell midden. That is the most characteristic one. And the type of basket counted for 90% of 200 baskets of the large type. So that is a quite iconic type of the basket from Higashimyo site. So I'll go to the next one. It is a used site dated to the late Jomon period. And that also shows the variety of techniques that are used in the Jomon basket. And some of them are not quite commonly used in contemporary basket. Some scholars think that it is mainly because the raw materials is very different, especially if you're using the bamboo, weaving the basket, you don't need to reinforce some weak part of the basket, for example, bottoms and near the mouth of this basket. This is a quite fascinating basket from Sagyuchi site in Fukushima Prefecture from northern part of Japan. The site is especially fantastic because that they can find from the only one pit, the 10 of different baskets in it. And they can see the different types of basket and different types of techniques are found in only one pit. And the other basket, the showing in the right photos, was included with found it in a like walnut. So it shows how they used at that time, and it's amazing. They find just in the way they were used. So the last one is the Shimayake Bayside. It's known for the basket and other organic materials because it is a waterlogged site, and that shows the variety of shapes and techniques, even though that is only one species mainly used for the basket. There's also, I want to show you the replication attempt of the one basket. If you take a closer look at this basket, you can find from the bottom to the top, there is a different techniques was used. And there was actually 2 times of attempt that replicate this basket. And the team was ended up the 2 different shapes of basket because the first attempt, they weren't really aware of that what kind of techniques was used. So next, so the second time, they asked the professional basket artist to weave them, and they found that actually the unexpected shape was found in this basket. So let's go to the another aspect of basketry making. This is a Jomon. This is a so-called Jomon calendar, first suggested by Tatsuo Kobayashi in 1986, and it was used by many scholars to show the regionality and of the subsistence. It was used to be the people focusing on the subsistence and how they get the food and food diversity. But recent studies shows that they're supposed to be some like plant using the some big aspect of plant use or these like land management aspect. So I put some example regarding to the basket weaving. It's there's not clear evidence of German basketry making needed to require to the intensive land management, but still from the ethnographic data and basket makers accounts, we can see this, there's some high season of gathering basket, or like you can find some specific the best season of gathering materials. And also in the conjunction of other subsistence, you will find some niche you can weaving the basket because it's kind of take a time a little bit. So for example, in very snowy area, people gathering the basket materials, the autumn, and they store them and weaving the basket in winter because outside there's tons of snows and they cannot really do like many things outside the house. So before going to the conclusion, I'd like to take the moment how basket study is relevant to today's issue. As many of us experienced in 2020, especially in California, California has 5 of 6 biggest wildfires in recorded history. And with the combination of strong wind and heat waves, we had to endure the evacuation and power outages and bad air qualities. as recent fire events provoked that ongoing discussion about indigenous practices that keep the environment safer for humans and also other species. We are now more aware of that, the importance of having conversations about long-term land management and its necessity for a healthy and stable life. Baskets are sourced from the local environment and possess valuable information about the historical relationship between humans and local environment. Ethnographic data in California shows that prescribed fire promotes the growth of basket making materials. In Japan, also the generations that used to go to the mountains that has much more intimate relationship with the local environment. In recent climate disasters in Japan, the number of affected people are also multiplied because we forgot or just ignored the knowledge our previous generations had. For example, the floods, typhoon, and the heavy rains, landslide. After many people died and lost their houses, we finally noticed that there was a warning by ancestors, such as in form of the local name, place name, or simply oral tradition says that there is a dangerous place, don't live here, or something. Or how we supposed to do when we meet some catastrophic situation. So again, it's a conclusion. Why we should care about basket? Our relationship to the local biosphere is closely connected how we can live where we are. At this time, we are realizing that we need to reestablish the more intimate, healthy relationships that our previous generations had with the land in various ways. So I think there's three big elements that land management, including plant use, that I'm focusing on, and that's closely connected to traditional, it's ecological, traditional ecological knowledge, and that's also connected to the local long-term environmental reconstruction that archaeobotany can contribute to. And also the archaeological analysis on human activities in each region that brings us to the awareness of long-term sustainability. And basketry is all closely connected to these elements, and it's so that it's really tied to the identity of local communities. Thank you for listening to today's talk. That's it.
Thank you so much. And I'd like everyone to join me in giving a virtual thank you and round of applause. I hope you can hear all of us, Kaz. I have a question to kind of get our conversation started, and I want to remind our audience that you can submit questions directly to me by messaging them to me in the chat. Just go to the chat and select my name from the drop-down menu, and I'll be posing questions to Kaz. But to start us off, I'd love to kind of dive back into some of the incredible baskets that you showed us and wonder if you can give us some more context for a couple of the archaeological sites that they were in and speak to what the conditions were that allowed for such incredible preservation of some of these baskets.
Yeah, so to be honest, that is quite rare, especially the acid soil in Japanese archipelago and lowland or waterlogged site is the only place we can find these organic materials. So I didn't mention that, but mountainous area basket I mentioned as a ethnographic account of basket makers account is located in in the central part of Japan, like the spine of the Japanese archipelago. But these Jomon baskets are found only this like seashore line, alongside the seashore line. So it is a little bit, there's a little bit gap, but still that carries a lot of rich information about basket.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I have some great audience questions coming in. Thank you all for submitting those. This question comes from Anna Nielsen, who wants to share. Thank you for an excellent talk, Kaz. They ask, it's clear that baskets were extremely important tools in ancient times, and they often get overlooked today. How did you become interested in studying baskets? And do you have experiences where baskets really caught your interest?
Yeah, so actually the Higashino-side basket is like my first lab, I'd say. I went to the like the lab travel with the lab members in Higashino side to the region of southern part of Japan. And we visited to the site, and just that struck me how like intrication of this basket and techniques was well preserved. And that's showing up in front of us, like over the 6,000 years of gap. So it's a like really, I don't know. Does it answer the question? That's my starting point of the interest in the basket.
Yeah, I kind of have a follow-up question to that question, which is you kind of talked about your the evolution of your involvement in these studies from your master's thesis to your PhD thesis. And it sounds like one of the main things that changed was your work directly with contemporary basket weavers. Can you speak to some of the, you've spoken a little bit about what kinds of insights the work that working with them has shed on your archaeological work, but can you talk a little bit more about how you've gotten connected with these contemporary weavers and what they've brought to this work?
Yeah, so the main, what can I say, that for example, that many contemporary basket weavers are really involved in local environment. So, and also some archaeobotanical study shows that there is an unknown, it is not really like unknown, just forgotten materials that people used to use in specific areas. So we kind of discover that, okay, so this area that was used these kind of materials, and that's the contemporary basket makers totally don't use, mainly because like if you used to one specific or multiple specific raw materials, that's kind of a like became your like very familiar materials. So it's good to stick on that. Oh, sorry. So I just really skimmed off from the question. Oh, so I started working with some like contemporary basket makers, and it's, I don't know, maybe the biggest point I learned from them is there is the not only shape, the raw materials, and how to choose the best quality of materials is most important part. And to choose the best materials, you have to know like very well the circumstances that you're going to take these materials.
Thank you. That's really great. We're getting some questions about basketry technique. One question asks, can we go into specific twining techniques used at both the Ryuzu and Sagyuchi sites? If you can speak to that at all.
Psychiatry sites, is that means like that share techniques in a German basket and contemporary basket?
Yeah, just about what types of techniques were used in weaving the baskets themselves.
Oh, so that's quite interesting thing is like we can find all kinds of weaving techniques that we can find in contemporary basket weaving. It's not my speculation, that my thought on that is like people in German period don't have like the iron tools, so they cannot really use the like processing the materials like bamboos, and they need to it doesn't mean that they don't have techniques, but they have like optimal and really closely connected that's raw materials that they know, and they are very good at using the materials they know. And so does it answer the question? I don't know. I'm just like talking very excited. And
Yeah, I hope so. Hopefully the person who asked that question can let us know if they have a follow-up question. This question is kind of about the context that this basketry tells us about the life of Jomon people. Were there gendered roles in basket weaving, gathering materials, and use of baskets?
Yeah, so we are not really sure that the gender scapes are involved in the German basketry, but the ethnographic data and basket makers contemporary Japan shows that there's some diversity of that. For example, I didn't mention that, but Ohara kago, Ohara basketry in central part of Japan was only inherited the first son of the house. And then now there's only one person who inherited the technique. So, but actually he is not a first son. So he kind of stolen the technique, like listening there, like next to the people who are talking about the techniques. So it's really interesting. Like when we look at some example basket weaving communities, it's generally says that there's the females are mainly involved in basketry making, and it's closely connected to some like foraging and plant use, but there's always an exception, and that's some area really have like very particular tradition of that.
Thanks. That's great. And someone asked a question here that I'm also curious about. So thanks for asking it. They say, this is a bit off topic of the baskets particularly, but you mentioned the use of baskets to hold chestnuts for insect repellent. I'm wondering if the chestnuts were used to make repellent or the baskets were meant to keep insects away from the chestnuts. And what can you say about why some sites would have so many baskets preserved in one area, particularly baskets still holding food items like nuts? And what does that say about whether these sites were abandoned quickly? It seems that like the baskets weren't abandoned because they were broken, or what can that tell us about the sites themselves?
Oh yeah, so maybe the one of the interesting example of why we can find so many baskets in one site is actually the Higashimyo site that I'm showing. The slide is the more than 70% of basket that's found in German period so far. That's occupied the 70% of basket. So that is quite amazing, but also which means it really depends on some great like awesome place to preserve these organic materials that were preserved. But it's supposed to be so many sites that just that environment didn't help to like preserve these organic materials, so we couldn't find it. The other thing is so abandoned baskets. That is also an interesting example in the other area of southern part of Japan. There's also the site called Shofukuji site. There is a many broken basket was found in storage pit that's supposed to used for like reinforce the walls. Because the soil is very fragile. It's kind of a sand texture, so it's easy to fall into the pit. So they used it for the texture to reinforce the pit. Yeah, and also we found several baskets that was broken in Higashimyo site. There was several basket that was penetrated by the wooden pick, what the word, the piece of wood seems like they wanted to keep the basket to this place. And this side was reconstructed as a brackish place. So there's supposed to be some like water streams. So they wanted to like the basket keep the same place. So yeah, I can keep talking like many other examples, but like I don't know.
No,
I can show you some example.
That's very interesting. Thank you so much. And I think since you're talking too about the environments in which these baskets are made and used, we have a great kind of transition to another question. This comes from Jordan Brown, who also wants to say wonderful talk. They say, I'm fascinated by the use of different plant species in different regions. Have there been significant vegetation changes in Japan in historical times that might have affected the availability of different materials in certain places? If so, is there any historical documentation of how basket makers may have responded to such environmental changes? And I'd also like to add another part to this question, which is whether any of this research is lending itself to changes in environmental protections today, now that we can use these archaeological pieces of evidence to better understand changing environments.
Oh yeah, so that's a great question. So I think I mentioned that the contemporary basket, not in the mountainous area, was overwhelmingly made of bamboo and bamboo families. And some people said that started around medieval era, but some people also said there was some. Where can we start? So there's a special groups of making basket by bamboo from southern part of Japan started to making basket for the emperor of Japan around 7th centuries, 8th centuries. And there was a historical document of that. And then after that, archaeological evidence of basket itself is quite few, unfortunately. But as long as we can see the basket in drawings, they seems like this from the size and the shapes, that seems like that also largely made of bamboo. So we are not really sure because the vegetation is really changed, but it's didn't change that much for like changing the all circumstances. That's such a dominance of bamboo basket. So there's still like leeway to we can think about why the bamboo is become that dominant position of basket making in contemporary Japan. But yeah, but still, it's also like really the urban central view, I guess. In a mountainous area, there are the people who are still making the taking the raw materials from their local circumstances, and that's didn't really change and didn't really affected by the climate differences over time.
Thank you. And that actually brings me to a couple of questions about bamboo baskets that are coming in. So one question asks if we can go back to the map and whether you could show the areas primarily using bamboo for baskets. And another question while we're looking at that map asks, what do you think is the most distinctive feature of Japanese bamboo baskets compared to other countries, given that bamboo baskets are fairly universal, particularly in Asia, and the material used pretty broadly?
Yeah, I'm also curious in that because I mainly focus on the prehistoric Japanese basket. I didn't really closely look at this, why bamboo basket became so popular. And can I see my points?
Can you share your, like go into presentation mode again so we can see it a little bigger?
Sorry. Oh. Yeah, so this is the, this shows a map, and the bamboo family, it's not particularly the same types of bamboo that is in the contemporary basket makers in many areas in Japan. But the Kanto region, this area, can you see my pointer here? Oh, no, maybe. So around
Yes, yeah, we can't see your pointer.
Oh, okay, so the Kanto Plateau, which Shimayake Bayside located in, is a big plateau, and the firstly, the one group of archaeobotanists started to searching for what differences of raw materials of German basket. They only found like family of bamboo, and they kind of get bored. Okay, so maybe we are going to find only baskets, like as sorry, the wherever we go to identify the raw materials. But it is not true. Actually, the only place we can find overwhelmingly bamboo family basket in German period is Kanto region. So these areas is more like snowy area. These you can find many other vines and cypress root. Oh no, it's not. Conifer wood roots, and also other species of like area roots was used by German people. And I'm not sure when the tradition to the bamboo was happened. Oh, I also wanted to point out the Shimayake Bayside and the Kanto region that used mainly bamboo families, but it's not the same type of bamboo that, oh, I think I said that, the type of contemporary basket. So we need to seek the how change happened and when it happened in Japanese archaeology. I'm very curious. Yeah.
Thanks. I'm going to bring our conversation kind of back to technique again just for a moment, because we have definitely, I can tell, some weavers in the room who are curious about techniques and materials. So I'm going to kind of combine a few questions here. One is whether there were any surprising techniques that were found in Jomon baskets, and one is specifically about a technique called the grapevine flower knot baskets that are still being made in Yamagata Prefecture, and whether that shows up as a technique in Jomon period baskets or just plain twining and plating, plain plating and twining. And then the last question is, so interesting techniques, did this particular technique show up? And then the last question is, what is the process that contemporary basket weavers use to replicate these baskets? Are they using the same materials? How are they determining technique?
Oh, yeah, so that's a great question. I think I have to introduce some books about the team. The team members wrote about their replication. Like this is a recent published book in Japan. I don't know, you can see or not. And so I will firstly answer the last question. When we I was just like participate in later on this group, and this group started to firstly identify the raw materials and try to find like, because they started in a Kanto region, they thought, okay, so just bamboo, let's go to get the bamboo and make it. But they found it seems impossible. That fine sprint they used seems so fine, and they didn't know how to make such a thin materials for basket making. And several years later, they noticed that, okay, so there's a best season we can get the materials. And they're supposedly the best year that we gathered the bamboo. For example, first year, second year, and 3 years later is like too thin and too hard. to process that. So there's not only their findings, they listening from the basket makers, they're listening the local peoples that are gathering the materials, and they get to the point, okay, so this is the best way and best season and best place. And still, we don't have that fine techniques to such a fine materials. So actually we used some iron tools. That is kind of cheating, but that was interesting. That is such hard thing to make such a fine basket without knowing the deep knowledge of these raw materials. And I kind of forget what the first and second question. Could you repeat it for me?
Sure. Yeah, the first and second questions were, firstly, just whether there were any particularly surprising techniques. I mean, it sounds like this is a great example of a surprising technique because it was so challenging to replicate. And the second question was whether you've seen a Mountain Beautiful grapevine flower knot baskets or the techniques used there in the Jomon period, or whether just plain plaiting and twining techniques were used, as in some of the baskets that were shown.
Oh, yeah. So Yamabudo, Japanese crimson grapevines were used in German basket as well. And the amazing techniques, maybe it's the same answers that I found. It's not about like superficial techniques that we can tell from the basket. It's like when we try to duplicate it, we notice that it's such a deeply connected to the knowledge. We have to know beforehand we started weaving, and it's like takes several years to notice and several years to condition the run to get the best materials for such a fine materials. Does it answer the question?
I hope so. I hope our audience members feel that that question was answered well. We're coming up to the end of our time here, so I just want to pose one last question, which I'm excited to pose because it comes from 4-year-old Charlie, who's in the audience today, who wants to know whether during the Jomon period, but perhaps you can speak to weavers today, whether there was one expert basket maker in an area that would supply baskets where everyone had this knowledge and made their own baskets. I know you spoke a little bit about that before, but maybe you can talk about what we know about the Jomon period.
So the question is like the contemporary basket makers that they are not professionals still making basket in specific areas and how they connected to the Jomon basket. I kind of missed the last part of the question.
Whether there in the Jomon period was one expert basket maker who made them for the community, or whether everyone was kind of making and using the baskets for themselves. I hope I rephrased that right.
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting question. I have been thinking about it and I actually don't have an answer for that. But regarding the amount of basket we found in one site, for example, the Higashimyo site, and that leads a reasonable assumption that maybe they used so many baskets in one site, and that's used in kind of every aspect of their daily lives. So I guess I can say that some people in a small community can make the basket in a German period, but I think it really depends on the communities, and we can't generalize all German people. And it also depends on how these raw materials can easily get, because it really depends on the vegetation and where their site was located in. And the seasonality is also the big part of that. If you need to get as much as materials they use for 1 year in only 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you need to like ask to the other people to cooperate with that. But Yeah, and it reminds me the other ethnographic account outside of Japan. For example, Madagascar Island, there's a kind of everyone can live in the basket. And it started like when they were really young children. They kind of ran just seeing the adult people did. And when they grow up like middle teenager, they can all weave basket. So I think in a small community, the similar things happen. Yeah, but totally my speculation. I don't have clear evidence for that to answer the question.
Thank you. I think that was a great answer and really speaks to the variety that that you've shown us in the baskets here tonight, both from contemporary weavers and from the Jomon period. So I just want to thank you again, and we can all give you a virtual round of applause for such a fabulous presentation. I apologize that I didn't get to everyone's questions today. I'll make sure to pass them on to Kaz after today's presentation. And I just want to thank everyone again for being here. I want to thank the Center for Japanese Studies for co-hosting. I want to thank Junko Habu for presenting and giving the introduction tonight. And I also want to thank Sam Kurtz, an undergraduate student at Berkeley, who's been helping us out with the tech on the back end here. So thank you all again. We'll stick around for a minute and have a wonderful evening or day, depending on where you are in the world. And we'll hope to see you at an event again soon at the Hearst Museum.
Thank you, Katie and Sam, and thank you, Kaz.
Thank you so much for joining here to listen to this talk.